What does it mean when we say we are created in God's image? And furthermore, what would it mean to say that we are created to rule over God's creation? That's what it says in the text today. Let's dive in and look at what could that concept mean, that we are made in God's image to be his rulers on earth. Genesis 2, 4 through 17. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created. On the day the Lord God made the earth and sky, before any wild plants appeared on the earth, and before any field crops grew, because the Lord God hadn't yet set rain on the earth, and there was still no human being to farm the fertile land. Though a stream rose up from the earth and watered all of the fertile land, the Lord God formed the human from the topsoil of the fertile land and blew life's breath into his nostrils. The human came to life. The Lord God planted a garden in Eden, in the east, and put there a human he had formed. In the fertile land the Lord God grew every beautiful tree with edible fruit, and also grew the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A river flows from Eden to water the garden, and from there it divides into 4 headwaters. The name of the first river is the Pishon. It flows around the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. That land's gold is pure, and the land also has sweet-smelling resins and gemstones. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It flows around the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris, flowing east of Assyria. And the name of the fourth river is the Euphrates. The Lord God took the human and settled him in the Garden of Eden to farm it and to take care of it. The Lord God commanded the human, "Eat your fill from all of the garden's trees. But don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because on the day you eat from it, you will die." Okay, so where could we start with this? One, I want to kind of dive a little deeper into the word study I started last week, but to remind us, the word human here, it's the word Adam, where we get the name Adam. And it's a collective noun in this context. God is showing us how he's forming, especially last week, he's formed humanity in God's image. But God created the first human, the Adam, and the reason I'm pronouncing it that way is because here God took the human from the topsoil of the fertile land, and this word is Adamah. So quite literally, it's the earth creature. God formed the Adam from the Adamah, formed the earth creature from the earth itself, and blew life's breath into his nostrils. That's the word for spirit, wind, breath. It's all the same. So God's spirit hovering over the deep. It's the word ruach. And God breathed his life, his spirit, into this earth creature, and he came alive. Another just observation that jumps out at me from this scene is the verbs used for what these humans were created to do. God hadn't yet sent rain on the earth because there was still no human to farm the fertile land. Here we get a new verb to talk about humans' role in God's creation. If you remember from last week, we talked about human beings created in God's image to rule and to take mastery over all of creation. And what it looks like to rule as God's image bearers was really from last week. This week, we get a few different verbs. We're called to farm. We're the gardeners of God's good creation here as well. We're called to farm and to take care of God's world. We are God's gardeners. I like that. What does it look like? So last week, we're God's rulers. We're kings and queens. Now we're God's gardeners. There's something actually even more fascinating with this. This word farm and take care, the original Hebrew, you could also translate it to work and keep, or to guard and minister. That's what these words actually mean right here. And the reason I point that out, these words show up in a pair in another place when you're talking about the priests of the temple. So, for instance, you might want to look up Numbers chapter 3, verse 7 and 8. And there, the priests standing over the tabernacle are called to guard and minister over the holy things. And it's those same verbs that the first humans were given to take care of God's garden is the same verbs that the priests are given to take care of the worship of God. Essentially, what I'm kind of drawing here, I'm jumping into some interpretation, but humanity was formed to be the priests over God's creation, to allow what it means to rule in God's image means to help all people and all of creation worship God as its creator, to give glory and honor to God. They're called to guard and minister, to work and keep, to farm and take care of what God has created. Another quick question that often comes up is, what is going on with the knowledge of good and evil? Why does God put a tree of knowledge of good and evil if it's just going to lead to our death? It seems kind of harsh. God creates the tree of life, which gives us access to God's life. And God creates the knowledge of good and evil, this tree that God says, if you eat of it, you will die. This is not a vindictive God. This is not a God who's just tempting us, waiting for us to fall. We'll unpack this as time goes on. I'd love to hear your questions, but one quick answer. It's clear as you keep reading the story, God absolutely is going to be teaching and helping these humans grow. He wants them to grow in wisdom and knowledge and learning. They're not supposed to remain these ignorant children. But the point of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is a question. It's a test to say, will you choose God's wisdom? Will you continue to seek the Lord and get your wisdom and your directives for life from Him? Or do you want to go it your own way? Taking from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it's not because knowledge in itself is bad, it's because it's this act of plucking for yourself in your own way, in your own path, in your own understanding, without giving heed to God's understanding, to God's wisdom. And so it's this choice to say, are you going to do this in relationship with God, or are you going to do this all by yourself? So think about what a powerful image that is, that you and I were called to be kings and queens over God's earth. God is the great God, the great king over all other kings, but we were created to be kind of sub-rulers with Him. What could that mean? God is sitting on His throne, and we are called to be His image bearers, bringing His justice and beauty and creativity and love and rule in the world. The world is looking for us to step forward in that kind of role. Go out this week and think about what that might mean for you. Maybe that's a new perspective for you. Too much of my faith growing up was about getting my assurance that I was going to heaven, and it had nothing to do with how I actually lived my life day to day. But if I was actually called to be God's image bearers and bring His rule and justice and peace and beauty into the world, that might change everything. Is there one thing that you could do this week to step more into that? Maybe it's as simple as helping out a neighbor or sharing of God's goodness to the world. But what would it look like for you to own that God created you to be His king or His queen?